The controlled
Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, we are live. Welcome back to the Global Financial Reset, Surviving and Thriving the Transition. Joining me today in just a moment are returning guests Will Barney, Bill Armour, and Patriot Streetfighter Scott McKay. Now, for those of us struggling to get by with little or no financial assets, which is probably the lion's share of America, to protect and or invest, the education in each and every one of these episodes every week will benefit every one of us. So continue to join us, continue to stay with us. Relief is coming to us all. So please do listen up and remember, where we go one, we go all. All right, let's take a look at some announcements before we launch into the broadcast, which will be just in a moment or so. I'm launching a new monthly panel show. We're not going to announce the guests for the first panel as we're assembling that now, but believe me, it's people you want to hear from. Off-World with JMC, monthly panel beginning later this month, coming up in June. Also, meet Wano Savin and retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Mekwon's Chief of Staff for the Fraud Fighter Summit. Visit fraudfightersummit.us. Get out to Las Vegas, June 15th through June 17th. All the frauds are being exposed: bond fraud, government waste and corruption, election fraud, you name it. Every corner you turn, there's the F word, fraud. And they're going to be there taking it on with an incredible panel of guests. So please get out there, fraudfightersummit.us. Also, while we're speaking about our good friend Wano Savin, come join us May 28th in our Patriot Q&A Power Hour. This is a private live Zoom room. It's not a show. We're not there with a broadcast. We're there for one solid hour for one purpose, for Wano Savin to answer your questions. So come join us May 28th, 8 p.m. Eastern. How do you join? Visit jmcbroadcasting.com, click on Premium Portal, and see if that's for you. If it is, we look forward to seeing you there. All right, next image, please. I kick off a lot of these broadcasts with this statement from Juan to sort of heed the call. Pardon me, folks, still got the crop burning in my lungs. Wano Savin has stated, we will be facing an economic extinction event, and went on to say, and I quote, and all these things we're going to have to fight in this reset of America. The war in the financial realm is going to be the greatest of them all. He went on to say, we can expect to see a 6 to 8 times more of a collapse in this bond, particularly municipal, meltdown that we did see in the market collapse of 08 and 09. And he said that's a conservative number. Fortunately, at the end of this broadcast, I will outline 5 specific solutions to this escalating crisis and educational direction for you. Because chaos without clarity, problems without solutions, steer clear from disruptive, fear-porn podcasters. Use discernment and do choose wisely. Be sure to listen to this broadcast to the very end, again, as I will provide action items for each and every one of us, whether you have assets to protect or not. Let's get right into it with my guest. But before we do, got to put this disclaimer out there. You know, there's still those folks out there. The information provided by me and my guests is for educational purposes only and is not to be considered as specific investment, tax, nor legal advice. You are encouraged to do your own research and consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals. And to that point, I can help you with that process of the team you have or are assembling. Visit wealthcoachuniversity.com, and you really do want to do this. Scroll down a little bit, do it after the show, but make a note. Click on that little blue box that says Advisor Scorecard. You'll love what you see there, and it's a powerful tool for you to machete through the madness of Wall Street and the bankers. All right, so let's move on here in just a moment. Okay, I've got a tech issue. I uploaded this and it did not save, so bear with me. Yeah, we've got Will Barney. You know, while I'm getting my technology in order, so the show runs smooth as they normally do. Bear with me. I will tell you, I have three of incredible friends and fellow patriots and extremely valuable individuals joining us on this program right now. And it's so good. It's a breath of fresh air for the times that we're in right now. Yes, it's dark, it's dangerous, and people are hurting. I get that. But it is so exciting. There is so much happening because we are now taking the reins away from a couple hundred years, certainly since 1913, away from the system that has enslaved us all. All right, I'm ready to go now. Will Barney brings over 19 years of experience in the banking sector, where he has developed a strong specialization in structuring funding for commercial projects on a global scale. You can learn more about Will Barney by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com. Click on contributors. All three of my guests, you'll see their name, their bio, and a link to their world there. Visit enochgs.com. We'll talk about that later. Also joining us, my next guest brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise concerning the economy and precious metals. Precious metals among the biggest economic story of the day, and he's an expert in this area. He is my highly recommended resource for your gold and silver acquisitions, inside or outside of your IRA or qualified plans. So I'm real happy to have Bill Armour joining us again every other week as he has. All right. The majority of our audience knows my next guest, and for those newly coming aboard, you'll want to get to know him. I shall simply say this. I discovered Scott McKay when he blasted on the scene, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago on YouTube, one of the most powerful and influential voices in the new media space during these past several years. You can follow Patriot Streetfighter on Rumble and get out to meet Scott McKay. He travels the country at various events, powerful figure and a good friend, the guy you want next to you in the foxhole. And he's in the foxhole of the war we're in right now, and he's going to be on the screen with you in 3 seconds. Please welcome Will Barney, Bill Armour, and Patriot Streetfighter Scott McKay. Hello, gentlemen.
Great to be here.
Hi, John. Good to be with you.
Thanks for being here, everyone. I'm getting in the zone here. Pardon me. All right. There's a lot to unpack. What I'm going to do, gentlemen, is I'll start at the top of the panel with Will, go to Bill, and then go to Scott. And that'll be the format as I take us through about a half a dozen subjects. Everything, of course, is related to the economy. This show is focused, global financial reset. However, we know all the geopolitical events and moves that our military is making in this operation will be discussed as well, because it's all part and parcel. But so let's begin with this. We have one moment. I had a tech issue right before we launched, and it's finishing its way out here. Let's talk about Powell out and Kevin Warsh in. This is now official, the confirmation of Kevin Warsh. We've talked about this before on the show, the fun and hat tips our president has given us when he published the announcement a month or two ago that you'll love Kevin Warsh because he's central casting. I always have to throw that in there because that is noteworthy, to say the least. But having said that, on a more important note, we'll begin with Will Barney. Will, what are your comments about Kevin Warsh coming in, and what type of policies do you think he will deploy under the crushing and disintegrating Federal Reserve, and what impact will that have on the economy?
Well, what's interesting about Kevin Warsh is that he's following another central casting character, Powell. Jerome Powell played his part so perfectly. I don't think he could have done a better job of completely abolishing the reputation of the Federal Reserve than Jerome Powell did. And it was so fantastic to see this play out. You know, Donald Trump was the one that appointed him. And then they had this fake war between themselves, of which Donald Trump would continue to say, "Oh, he's too late," called him "too late, pal," and he's never on top of it. And he continued to be everything Trump said he was to a T. It was so perfect. And he's going to stay on the board so that he can help with the rest of the disintegration or the retirement of the Fed. Now we've got Kevin Warsh coming in, so a new face. He happens to be the 17th Fed member. Isn't that interesting? The 17th Fed chairman to take over the board. And, you know, we know there's something to the numbers. And Kevin is a pro crypto guy. He's all about, let's move into the digital age. And so you're going to see a lot of changes come with the integration of digital technology that I think is going to be important, because we can't just turn it, as much as we don't like the Federal Reserve, we can't just turn it off when the whole country in the world is running on that. It would be catastrophic to do that. So what we need to have is we need to have a friendly environment where digital blockchain can come into its own, which is coming with the Clarity Act, so that that can stand itself up. We can have a new currency on there, and then we'll have both of them, I think, side by side for a little bit while people begin to make the transition. If one's asset backed, the other is fiat, it's not a hard decision for people to make. They just want to learn the new system. So I think that you're going to see a managed retirement in terms of the Fed under the Chairman Warsh. And I think he's going to do a great job of, you know, trying to keep stability for as long as it's needed while we transition into the new digital age.
Managed retirement. What a way with words, and so well said, Will. And I'll tell you a quick comment about what that inspired in me just seconds ago. Is when we're at war. I mean, you're talking about, well, more than hundreds of years, but we'll just say in the last 100 or so years, taking control away of quadrillions of dollars from the evil monsters without it being a kinetic war. All the other wars were kinetic based, fighting for money, resources, territory, etc. This one's being done under the managed retirement of the Federal Reserve. So well said. And you know, those that don't believe in the plan, well, this is the plan, and it is brilliant, and it is excellently, precisely being delivered by Trump, the military, and the White Hats. Thank you, Will Barney. All right, Bill Armour, thanks for being here, sir. What's your take on the transition of Powell and the policies of Warsh?
Yeah, I think, and I think Will Barney hit it right on the head there, which is, this is not like a regime shift, right? This is personnel change. I think that in a lot of ways, Warsh will get a lot of credit as we look back on history, as he put it, as the managed retirement. I think that his name will get there, but I do want to, and I agree with Barney, Will Barney as well, about how Powell has played the part there in kind of controlled opposition, in setting this up and pointing out the deficiencies of the Fed. And I think that, you know, as history looks back, he'll have played a great part, and we'll be thankful for that. But I think Warsh obviously will get a lot of credit for overseeing directly here the complete retirement of that. So we're going to see the upending of that entire system. You know, he's a great pick. I'm excited, really, really excited to see. I just think it continues to add to what we've talked about for so long. You know, I know a couple shows back, we talked about all the things that we're pointing to, the reset occurring. And I think that this is one here that will be one we look back at as another major point. So this one obviously about to happen, hasn't quite happened, but will be another major point there. I also think that, again, you know, some of the economic pieces he does there is a good fit, but, you know, another conversation. But ultimately, we're looking forward to continuing this drive towards retiring the Fed and moving forward into, you know, resetting things to a gold-backed and a currency here that favors the people, not the elites.
Yes, Bill, you've been in this game for a long time, as all of us on the screen have. It's my third decade swimming in this swamp. And did you ever think we would see the day that we're having this conversation? I never did. And again, I say this every week, but I should probably bring Mr. G on, G. Edward Griffin. And I
Yeah,
interviewed
right.
him and worked with him many years ago. This is a great time in history, and we're all here, and it's fantastic. Thanks for weighing in, Bill. And of course, my good friend, Patriot Streetfighter Scott McKay. Thank you, Scott, for carving out some time. I know you're traveling the country and quite busy. Welcome back to the broadcast. How would you like to weigh in?
Well, good to be here as always, and it's kind of rarefied air for me to be able to be on a panel with the firepower we have with Will and Bill here. So to me, it's always it's a privilege, really, and to learn from them. As I was listening to their commentary and help people understand what this war really is about. And in fact, my thought was the financial side is the absolute axis with which this entire war spins on. Without the either decapitation or transition of this financial system, it doesn't matter what goes on anywhere else in the world, because the baseline is the financial system. It is the amazingly crafted envelope to enslave humanity. And I like what Will said. This managed decline, this managed transition, managed retirement, whether it's Powell or anybody else. Just as I'm listening to you guys talk, think about the brilliance, the absolute brilliance behind this plan to get us to where we are today. To me, some days I just look at this thing as it's unfolding. I'm just looking at a couple X posts when I sat down here, and the news is coming out on the decapitation of the IRS and all these things. And I just think to myself, we're 60 years into this thing, at least. And just think of all these men and women over decades, the ones that handed off the baton generationally, that aren't going to be here to see the end of this thing. When they started it, probably thought it would happen sooner. But the aspect of everything that's gotten us here today, there are so many unsung heroes in the world that will never be known. Their names will never show up in history, who did things that we couldn't even comprehend. And sometimes I like to say, look, this is easy street for us. We're here at this period of time fighting this war, and it's now kind of the end thing. It's the trend, it's a movement, it's accepted, and a lot of attention on it. It's easy for us, right? Because we're here. Now, we've been at this for decades, all of us in some capacity. But to just think about how we got here and where we are, sometimes we together have to take a moment and sit back and say, Holy Mary, Mother of God, look where we are on this planet right now. And we're just in a process of making this transition. Feel sorry for the souls that aren't here to be part of this, actually, and see it as it unfolds.
Yeah, and as difficult as all the many challenges that all of us listening to this broadcast have endured, from the health attacks and the wealth attacks and the information attacks and everything else, we need to be grateful that we're actually here at this time, because this is a massive movement for humanity. It's saving and restoring our republic, and it's a redirection and course correction of all of humanity. And we're going to talk about UFOs a little bit later, because it's time to get into that. But and as it relates to the economy, but before we do, let's put up this image to my producer. I think it was Benny Johnson who published this. Let's take a peek at it. Yeah, there it is. Okay, just in, DOJ launching 1.8 billion compensation fund for individuals unfairly targeted by the Biden administration. For all those folks that say nothing's happening and, blah, 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 all you got to do is go back. Let's go back to the panel. All you got to do is go back and take a look at all the broadcasts at JMC Broadcasting, and certainly what Scott McKay puts out and where Will and Bill appear over the last year or so. There are so many things happening on so many fronts in the justice area, never mind the realignment of everything. But let's have the panel weigh in on 1.8 billion. President Trump working for the people. What do you say about that, Will?
Well, it's kind of fascinating. We heard the actual number was 1,776,000,000 that was set aside, and this was an agreement where Trump dropped his case against. He had a lawsuit against the IRS for disclosing his personal information, leaking it out there to the public, and he agreed to drop that lawsuit if this fund was put into place to compensate everybody that had been unfairly targeted. Now, that's wholly inadequate when you think about the numbers of people that have been targeted by the IRS.
Yeah.
They acted like mafia thugs for years
Hmm.
in a system
Hmm.
that was really voluntary. Okay, and so it is it, but it is a step in the. If you look at the whole history of this, it's a step in the right direction. That some people are going to actually get some compensation. I think it's showing that we're moving in a place where justice can be carried out. And that goes along with everything that we've seen, particularly here in 2025, we had all
Hmm.
this buildup and preparation, but now in 2026, we're seeing really the entire setup of justice that's coming. Now, I personally don't think that we'll see ultimately justice occur in a bar certified court system. I think
That's right.
eventually we're going to have to move into military law because the military are the guys that swore allegiance to the Constitution. I think that justice needs to come by the law of the land. So I think that that's possibly where this goes. But the incredible opportunity here is that this deal was struck, the money's been put up and set aside, and there is going to be some people get compensation. Not everybody's getting compensation. Let's be honest about that. But this is a show of good faith that we're moving towards where we need to be and that justice is coming.
Absolutely. And we've discussed the repatriation of wealth many times. You've been on the panels here. We had an incredible episode with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox. And to our audience, a lot of people are asking me, when is he coming back? He'll be back soon. But yeah, you're right, Will. This is the tip of the iceberg and good faith. And this is where and when it begins. Great analysis of 2025 being the setup and 2026 starting to reap the fruits of that labor. Bill, what say you on this matter?
Yeah, and Will's right that it's not necessarily, not everyone is going to get what they're due and owed, but I think ultimately it's in a lot of ways it's symbolic, right? Like my mind goes to biblically, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and that foreshadows a little bit that ultimately Jesus is going to rise from the dead, and as he does. And so I think similarly here it speaks to the repatriation of wealth. Like everyone in this country has been taken advantage of and stolen from by the banking cabal, and this, while it seems it's relatively small by comparison, it is representative of this massive repatriation and change that is going to occur. So I think that it's symbolic. And again, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, they're beginning to see this is the kind of stuff that would have never happened. Justice would never have been served in any capacity, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And yet here we are. So I think it's good, clean drinking water for the thirsty. And again, it provides the awareness that something much greater is coming down the road.
So well said. Good, clean drinking water. I like that. Let's bring it on. Gallons and gallons and gallons of it. Thank you. That's what's happening, and let it flood the path and clean us all up. Thank you, Bill. Scott, great times right now. 1.8 billion. How do you see this?
Well, it looks to me like a criminal admission. I think getting people to wake up to and be aware that this is a criminal enterprise. The amazing thing about it is that where we are at this point in time, you think about it. I've heard this on multiple podcasts, and I was questioning exactly what the breadth of this would look like. But once they discovered USAID, Doge, all these things, and basically our entire national debt is all what they call our national debt, 43 trillion, is all stolen money and fraud. We own none of it. It's a massive criminal enterprise. And to listening to people say, I'm not filing my taxes. Why would I continue voluntarily to file this return and pay these criminals money after everything that we just were exposed to in the country? Honestly, I wish there'd be a lot more people, but I think I just heard the number recently. I wish I could remember it. It was staggering, the amount of people in this nation that do not file a federal tax return. I thought, what did they know all these years that I didn't know, right? But now that there's this criminal admission, I think, again, the sequence of everything they're doing and the time they're doing it is in such a manner that people are ready for it. If we would have seen this thing 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have had the attention of the people because we weren't there now. It took certain things to psychologically prepare us for it. And now that you're seeing that there's going to be a big payout, and I agree with Will, nowhere near. And the only thing that makes it to me just and fair is that if all that money comes from what they've stripped from all these criminals, which is certainly a drop in the bucket, from them personally, from their assets, from their seized wealth for being involved in crimes against humanity. If it's coming from them, it's even better. But so that's a question I would, on this show, like to ask everybody out there. How much further are we going to go to be acquiescent and complicit in our own enslavement and victimhood by continuing to pay this criminal enterprise, this agency that has nothing to do with serving the United States? And I think, again, this is a build up to that. As of course, we know that that agency does not quite have the power. I think they hired 87,000 new agents under the Biden administration to start going out and do what they do. Criminally steal people's assets and money. And now those are all being redirected, I think, into the Treasury, if I'm not mistaken, which means now we're going to have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people at that agency working for the American people, as opposed to working against them. But it's a big turning point right now with this whole IRS seizure, I guess I should say, of everything that goes on behind those doors.
So well said, Scott. Again, another soundbite. We gave you three soundbite masters today. Scott McKay, criminal admission. Criminal admission. Those are powerful words. That's the opening door, and the tide has definitely shifted. While we're talking about the three-letter organization, the U.S. Treasury on March 26th, as this panel and most of our audience knows, published, the Treasury did, I call it a press release, stating, the new currency that's coming out, with President Donald Trump's being the first sitting president to have a signature on currency. As you connect the dots, which we have done all along here on the GFR with many different guests, military, intelligence, and economic, and others, surely we will be ending the use of this Federal Reserve note. And this may be coming much sooner than we think. And we're going to discuss that in just a moment. I'm laying the groundwork. Money as debt, the Federal Reserve note, is coming to an end. We'll be back to constitutional money backed by gold, silver, and other assets, ultimately en route to perhaps a stable coin in the QFS. Some feel this announcement about the release of the new currency, a US dollar versus a Federal Reserve note. And again, for those just coming aboard, words mean something. Federal, look at your money, your $1 or your $100 bill, any one of them. Federal Reserve note. Federal Reserve, private bank, note, obligation, debt too. There is no money. So we're returning to sound money, to God's money, to constitutional money, ultimately, like I said, in a series of steps to a QFS. So some feel this announcement, now I get to my question. Some feel that the announcement and shift of us being able to possess, use, and work with the new currency with President Trump may be coming June or July. What's your take on the time? And usually we don't visit timing, but this one, you've got so many dots to connect. And particularly last week, we had John Dowling and Captain Rob Cunningham on, and they did an incredible job at commenting on this. And I'd love to hear what this panel has to say. We are talking our opinions about date specific in the speculation world. June or July, is it that soon we may have these dollar bills, the new money, in our hands, Will Barney?
Well, I usually never get into dates. However, the administration is giving us dates. Okay. This is, in fact, that date that came out in March is the first time we've actually been given any kind, second time, I would say. The first time we were given dates is when we were told that the new Trump accounts for babies would begin on the 4th of July. Now, why wait till the 4th of July, right? But that's what they're waiting. They're going to launch it on the 4th of July. So that was an indication right there that we're going to set up the next generation for wealth. We're not going to suffer and be enslaved in poverty anymore. We're setting that up. So that was the first date that we received. Then we had Scott Bessent coming out and making several declarations that people were asking about the $2,000 of money that could have come from the tariffs when's that going to actually get to the people? And Scott said, well, it'll probably be the middle of 26, right? And they asked Trump, and he said, probably the middle of 26, right? They're both staying vague. And then the Treasury puts out this date that currency would be issued on the 4th of July bearing Scott's signature and President Trump's signature, but that there could be some $100 bills coming preceding that, perhaps by the middle of June. So we're not speculating here. This is the government putting out dates, right? And so I think it's we're comfortable to say that something's going to happen. Something significant is going to happen here. And I think it was important that we had this Fed chairman shift prior to all of that occurring as part of the narrative. Now, I do think Jerome Powell filled his role perfectly, much like Gensler, the previous SEC chairman, filled his role perfectly by keeping Ripple tied up in lawsuits with the SEC until it was time to let it out of the bag, so to speak. And all of that kept the speculators away from XRP and some of these other currencies in that meantime. So I think when we get to the end of this narrative, to the end of the show, we're going to find out that there were years and years of preparation that went into what you're seeing being realized right now. And that, Scott said that earlier in the show, that 60 years. So go back to when Kennedy was assassinated. I was on a Zoom call today with someone from Indonesia, and we were talking about this, and they were mentioning to me how in one of the government buildings there's this great picture of JFK and President Sukarno together as friends, and they were smiling and everything else. Well, I've seen pictures where the two of them were signing the new silver certificate notes that were going to be issued 10 days following his assassination. And so that's how close it got when they said, we got to take him out. The Federal Reserve would have been no more. In fact, had JFK and Sukarno been successful, we probably wouldn't even have homelessness and poverty today, right? But now here we are 60 years later, 60 plus years later, and we're now getting to the point of this. The whole key issue here is that when JFK was removed, and Sukarno was removed too, he was put under house arrest and later was killed, as they claim, executed for his crimes, so to speak, okay? We'll find out information. I know some people that claim that he perhaps is still alive, but we'll have to see how that plays out. But the bottom line is this: the agenda hasn't changed. The freedom of the world is still going forward, albeit many years later. Now we have a position where through careful strategy and planning, we've been able to weaken the cabal to a place where they can't fight back. And a big point of that was this Iran situation. And I know we're going to talk about this later in the program, so I won't go into it now. But had we not removed the military power within Iran, you better believe all those bombs and missiles will be dropped on our heads if we try to change this financial system. So everything you're watching is a carefully crafted plan. It is military strategy at its finest. And it's incredible as we lead up to this 4th of July date, how all of that military action is preceding what is going to be all of the financial action that is going to lead us into the golden age. And it's a very exciting time.
Thank you, Will Barney. So well said. You unpacked quite a bit there. I'll pedal back for 3 quick comments and we'll take it through the panel. The word that came to my mind when you were talking about the children, so they don't end up growing up as debt slaves, as everyone on this panel and most of the people listening to this broadcast have. It's a promise for the future. We've always had the mantra in America, and I think Ronald Reagan reminded us of this, that you want to leave to your children and grandchildren a better opportunity and a better world than the one you lived in. And unfortunately, on our watch, we weren't doing that. It slipped away. The Ben Franklin, if you can, Republic, if you can keep it, we didn't keep it. We lost it. And that was on our watch. Now, not necessarily that everyone wasn't doing something, and we certainly have put our chips in the game, but But the bottom line is that's not going to happen for the future. So you're looking for some good news, folks, for your children and grandchildren or great grandchildren. You just got that from Will Barney, at least as the messenger of it. Also, you invoke JFK. I've got to mention this to our viewers. This Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're publishing Conversations of Consequence, where I feature the important voices of our time to weigh in on things, but also we learn about their life and their journey as a child growing up to, what led them to their life's work. I sat down for 90 minutes with Dr. Jerome Corsi. You'll want to listen to that episode as it relates to what Will just spoke about concerning JFK. He was pretty up front and close to the mob and some other very important figures concerning the assassination of JFK. And as much as we've all learned and heard about JFK, you'll learn some more from Jerome Corsi on that. And in conclusion on my comments to Will is you invoke JFK. So what comes to my mind with those, the silver certificates being one of the few reasons they did away with JFK. It's the popular phrase that a lot of folks out there know. I'm going to say it. JFK was the starter and Trump is the finisher. And you can take that all the way to the gold dealer, forget the bank. And to the gold dealer, we've got Bill Armour. Bill, how would you like to weigh in on speculative dates, June, July? Looks like we're within the 30-day plus period for something extraordinary to happen. How would you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say Judy Shelton, former economic advisor to Trump, has been on record many, many times saying July 4th would be the date for something like this, in so many words. So I would say that that's been out there for a while and has just been repeated and parroted many times by her. Obviously, there's a number of other things we could point to. When you talk about kind of the military strategy of all this and how carefully planned it is, another one that I would point to is part of this is we need to have the gold to back, to have an asset-backed currency moving forward. So, whether that's the plane loads we've reacquired from the Vatican, or even currently ongoing, the fact that this ongoing war with Iran is keeping gold prices relatively low by virtue of a lot of those countries that normally would sell oil are not able to sell as much oil, and therefore they're having to sell gold. And so the United States is able to buy at a much discounted price gold. And so we're artificially keeping the price low, so so we can continue to stockpile gold. Right now, for the first time in history, gold has surpassed, or at least obviously since we've been on Treasury note, has surpassed any other asset class for the most worldwide owned assets. So that's more than Treasuries, more than anything, bonds, whatever it might be, is gold. And that's the first time in history that's ever happened. So we're crossing that threshold. So it's twofold, right? Confidence continues to be lowered in the current economic system, the fiat system that we're doing away with, which I think is important because first you have to change sentiment before you make these big firework changes. And I think that they're accomplishing that very well. I think even the layman is looking around and saying, I don't think that this system is working. You approach, $40+ trillion in national debt. Interest on that national debt is over $1 trillion a year. So we spend more on interest on our national debt than we do on our military. So you start to look at the numbers, and I think even just an average person that's not aware of any of this is gaining the perception that the current system is not working. And I think that perception change is incredibly important. And I think we've largely achieved that. And so the last piece here is accumulating the last bit of gold I think that we need to really maintain the ability to set the standard, right? If China, for instance, had all the gold, it'd be really hard to do this. But because we've accumulated such a vast amount here under President Trump, we've positioned ourselves incredibly well to not just make this transition, but to come out of this transition on the right side of it.
Yes, the winds of change are blowing in freedom, and it feels good. No question about it. You mentioned Judy Shelton, Bill. So to the Debbie Downers and the dart throwers out there, take note. We're talking about, from Will and Bill thus far, referencing Dan Scavino, I'll throw in, if you follow his memes, President Trump himself, Scott McKay, Judy Shelton, when it comes to new currency and a time frame that seems to be within the next 30+ days, throw some darts at them and see what happens. Scott McKay, how would you like to weigh in on the what none of us normally do is date speculation, but now it's well-founded and well-grounded. What say you, Scott?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm even really set on July 4, or, even though they're projecting that or telling us flat out that this is a date range or whatever where these things are going to change.
Mhm.
I'm not sure I trust them actually. Here's why. Watch this MAGA fracture, the weak MAGA patriots turning on Trump. We weren't supposed to be in any wars and all. I mean, it's happening out there, in blue and green grass America. It's happening in the podcast world. And I just scratched my head. What, how can I see these things? But all these other people that read all the intelligence, followed this narrative for the years that we have, and it occurred to me about a week or 2 weeks ago, I think I said it on a show. I said, all these people that are fracturing like this, here's what's happening. They're looking at all these actions through a political prism. And you have to look through a military prism because this is a military operation. Now, Sun Tzu's Art of War, all these things that we know that Trump's a master and expert at. And of course, this particular dynamic is deeply involved in that concept and that philosophy. It has to be. We lived in a world where anytime something that was going to, a move that was going to be made that could be countered, our side, Washington, D.C., the crime syndicate of politics, announce it to the whole world to make sure it blows up or people get killed or money gets stolen. And it just always baffled me, like how can we be this moronic in this country to do this? But again, it wasn't us, it was them. It was it was their crime syndicate. But now when they do come right out in the open and tell us, that's a move, but there's likely still a counter move. There's still possibilities that can play out, even though they're ultimately defeated. They're still going to try to blow stuff up, right? Just somewhere, because even if they're not successful, that realm that is occupying that seat of power is the satanic realm. It has been for a long, long time. And even if they're not victorious, that's not their point. Their point is to deliver one more body blow, any type of destruction on humanity as a whole or the world. That's victory for them, even if they're losing, because they play the long ball. They're playing for thousands of years versus what we do. If we can't accomplish it in our lifetime, we don't want to do it, well, because it'll never come to fruition. So, and the reason I bring that up is because there's still some moves like that can be made that would ultimately fail to keep this financial system from coming to play. I believe that, or I should say, I wouldn't be surprised if July 4 is a little late. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something a little early to keep these guys off balance from making any of these moves. So it happens in that time range of July the 4th, somewhere around there. Great, pretty cool, slap a high five. And it turned out just like they said. But I don't trust them. Why? Because they're playing a military game here. And deception is still a pretty important part of that battle. So I wouldn't be surprised if they surprise us with something that this time has good tidings for humanity. It's not going to be, catastrophic or something that harms us. But analyzing this, trying to analyze it every day, all of us, it keeps our brains seriously sharp. Because, like I said, if this was simple and we knew how this was going to play out and we could call timelines, it would be pretty boring, number one. Number two, that means that the other side knows and we're in trouble because they always have a counter. So I would say just keep your antennas up, because if I just feel like something could happen even before that.
You raised some good points and some good counter narratives I'd like to comment on. We'll go back to the beginning of the broadcast where I quoted Juan O'Savin about the greatest difficulty will be in the financial area that we've yet to come upon. To your point, Scott, and also the economic extinction event. We know about the municipal bonds and the systemic mess that's going to create probably the end of this year and moving forward. Real estate's already in trouble. And then there's speculations about a controlled demolition of the stock market. We'll have to see if that happens. But this is a battle. These are just some of the moves on it. But whether it's June 30th or July 4th, it's coming soon, folks. And that's one thing everyone on this panel agrees with. And your points are well taken, Scott, because military moves are a few steps ahead of all of us. And so we'll see how it all plays out. I'd like to run this clip to our audience for those newly coming aboard. And every week there's thousands of new people coming aboard. Welcome, welcome, welcome aboard. Welcome to your life. Welcome to the real world. And it's going to be a good one. We'll get through this together. I have a monthly panel show, several shows. You can learn about it, jmcbroadcasting.com. One of the monthly military panels is called Eyes on Gitmo. And I'm going to run a brief clip where I raise the economic issue to this panel. And let's have a listen to this clip and have our panel comment on it. This is a clip, I believe, from retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt. we'll begin with retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt. Sir, what did you take away from this trip to China, and what various ways will this have an impact on our agenda right now in restoring our constitutional republic? I think it was a hugely important meeting. What are your insights to this?
Yeah, I will agree with you, but I'll tell you that I've really evolved, as Matt knows, since I stepped away from just watching the retail version of the trip, listening to a lot of the reports, listening to the criticisms, listening to, oh, here comes Xi Jinping threatening us with the Thucydides trap because China's rising and we're not, and on and on. But then I did some digging. And I'm going to have to give the president not a C, but more of an A plus for this, because I think this is probably one of the most important meetings between the Chinese and American leader that we've seen since Nixon and sitting down with Mao. And the reason I say that is because every single time you see President Trump backslap Xi Jinping and effusively praise him, what essentially the president is really doing is involving himself in internal Chinese politics. All is not well in China, the CCP, and the Chinese system. And you have factions that are all vying for who is going to emerge as the next leader of China. The elders are trying to thwart Xi Jinping at every step. In response to that, Xi Jinping has wiped out most of his general officers for treason, and the point of that is he's not even left right now with a warfighting general. He's got a political commissar in Zhang and not much else. And so, where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is the president is sticking the needle right where it needs to tame the part of China that is beholden to the financialists at the City of London, and that would be Wen Jiabao, that would be Hu Jintao, and they have been for years. And so that does not make Xi Jinping a prince. It just makes for a very unlikely set of bedfellows as we ask China to get on the sidelines over Iran. We quietly in the back start to tell them that the espionage is going to stop here soon and you're leaving the Western Hemisphere. And yeah, we'll keep putting salve on the Taiwan thing, but we're on the right track with China for certain. And we'll see where it goes from here. I wouldn't pay attention to much on the economic deals. China's broke, can't afford those deals. 200 jets, they can't afford 50. And how do I know that? Well, the Politburo just put out 2 weeks ago a whole set of new economic regulations, which is going to essentially steal what's left of whatever wealth is left with the Chinese people, destroy private business, run up the credit card even further, and shield more CCP members from corruption. And so they're all scattering, but just like the Straits of Hormuz, this blade is not aimed at Beijing. This blade is aimed at London.
Thank you, General Holt. And for our audience, you want to visit the entire 90 minutes with the full panel. We covered a lot of issues. It's just published the other day or so, jmcbroadcasting.com. You can click the follow page and follow it wherever you choose. You know, I want to comment on something the General mentioned and then open this subject of China to this very panel and have you guys weigh in as well. He said, Xi Jinping, you're going to be leaving the Western Hemisphere, is the narrative. That's a big statement, folks. And, you know, we hadn't heard up till this year Western Hemisphere as part of the dialogue in politics. And it's become very powerful words. You need to understand what that means. And I think many of you have already connected the dots on that. I'll just say one quick thing. Watch the Jerome Corsi interview. He broke it down. He's an author of 50 books. He knows a thing or two. He's 80 years old. He's been around, good guy. He spoke about the Western Hemisphere and what's really going on in greater detail. But Will Barney, let's start at the top. What are your views concerning President Trump's trip to China? What did you glean from that trip?
Well, I agree with actually what General Holt is saying. It was an A-plus trip, and I have several reasons why I believe this. First of all, never in a trip, state trip to China, has the U.S. brought the Secretary of War, the Secretary of the Treasury, the top industry leaders in the United States, the billionaires running the biggest businesses in America, all in one trip to rub it in their face. It was epic. Okay. Now, there's a couple things that preceded this, and the Iran thing is preceding this. And it gets back to why General Holt said this is a knife to the city of London. And here's why. If you look at what happened with Venezuela, Venezuela was cheap oil. It was cheap oil for China. It was cheap, or in some cases, free oil for Cuba. And they had this interactive relationship with Iran. China's getting 60% of all of its oil needs from Iran at less than market rates. So super cheap energy that they could to keep their empires going. So now what's happened with this Iran war, first taking out Venezuela, and now all the oil coming out of Venezuela is at market rates, competitive with the world, okay? Now that we've got Iran sequestered, guess what? All of that's at market rates. In China and all these other communist countries are having to buy at full price. And guess what? They can't afford it. And who's been holding all that up? It's the city of London. It's the bankers. You see, 5 years ago, they let Hong Kong go back to China. Oh, the 100-year agreement is over and you can have Hong Kong back. But believe me when I tell you, they still own and control the banking of China. They control it by proxy through the banking regime. So, and their money system has been about backing it with oil. But now we have this issue where the entire oil supply chain is being completely rewritten. It's no longer coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. Now you have hundreds of vessels that are making their way to the United States to fill up with oil at market rate. Again, supporting America. So China now has to support America by buying their oil at full market price on top of everything else. And Trump walks in there. And of course, they had the children jumping up and down and making the big show when he shows up. But he went in there and he rubbed it in their face completely. Trump has this situation handled, and he's got the city of London on the ropes. They were controlling each of these communistic regimes as controlled opposition. And now they're economically crashing, where they can no longer be a force of controlled opposition. And so what happened and what played out here is not what anybody said. Trump walks away with, yeah, they said they put an order in for 200 jets from Boeing. That'll take years to actually play out. But the other thing that he gets is 17 billion, there's that 17 number again, 17 billion of corn and soybeans within the next year. Like, this isn't, it drags on for years. This is like they need it right now. And again, Trump keeps throwing this number at them on purpose. He is the, you know, they say, they call him the king, and we need to have no king's days. But you can't look at any global superpower and not see Donald Trump in the driver's seat of what's taking place here. And who is the beneficiary? It's the people across the whole world. And who is running for their lives and scared right now? It is the city of London and the rest of the cabal-controlled European leaders and everything else. They're freaking out. They're in a total panic because Donald Trump could just say, "We're done with NATO. Good luck to you all," and it would be all over, right? So he holds the cards, and he went into China holding all the cards, and he put them down on the table. They did have a couple of 2-hour conversations that nobody knows what they talked about. They were very private, but they walk away hand in hand, smiling at each other. I think what you're seeing here is, I think even Xi himself is tired of being under the control of London bankers. I think Trump and him have this in common. And this is playing out to London, the city of London's demise.
Oh, so well said. You know, to our viewers, I really hope you uh, are listening because these are very complicated military operations that this panel, each member of this panel has done a great job in explaining these things and connecting the dots. That was so well said and a great depiction of exactly what's taking place. And you know what comes to my mind, folks? Chess. I see a whole lot of mini checkmates on the chessboards happening a long, long way. Checkmate here, next, check over here, checkmate here, next. And the ultimate checkmate, folks, is coming soon. Remember, God always wins. And we got the right people in place taking care of business. Thank you, Will Barney. Great analysis. And I said this many years ago at American Media Periscope when James Grunwig was my co-host at the time. And I wasn't the only one. Scott McKay said these things and some other notable voices that President Trump, Chairman Xi, and Vladimir Putin are working together in concert against the ultimate enemy, which you just closed out your segment with, Will Barney. Thank you very much. Bill Armour, how would you like to unpack your views of China based on also what you've heard from General Holt and from Will Barney?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a couple terms that come to mind is overwhelming force, fire superiority, and the reason those come to mind for me in this scenario here is what one of the key parts that we talk about London, the banking association, is LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association, and it's where primarily physical gold is stored in the entire world. It's one of the main sort of locations in which gold is centralized. Why? For obvious reasons. We all know why. But the point there is that as he begins he's as Will Barney put well, he has the cards here. He's going to China and he's negotiating. He's I wouldn't say allies necessarily, but the useful pieces on the chessboard, so to speak, with China here. And as he presents his case, which is that we're winning this war, obviously the second, third, fourth, or fourth, fifth on the board want to team up with the winning side, and he presents a compelling case that we are on the winning side right now. And so as he accomplishes this, I think he's just maneuvering here. China is one of the largest gold holders in the entire world. So you add the United States, you add China that gets on board with that. Suddenly, when I go back to those initial words, force superior, or force and fire superiority, you're looking overwhelming force and fire superiority. You're looking at accumulating here more and more guns at the ready, so to speak, to accomplish this goal. It's not enough to have 51%. You want to have 70%, 80%, 90%, fighting against that last 10%. And I think that's what Trump is doing. I think he's always done that very well, which is he's never gone too fast, too quickly. He'll take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of push the envelope and then take a step back and then move forward again. It's kind of a masterful dance that I think he's always done, since day one. But I think he's doing kind of a similar thing here where he pushes it back, pulls back a little bit. And so when you see this with China, I think it continues to add to that he's accumulating here. He continues to accumulate. And as we move towards this final confrontation, so to speak, it will not be one that is won by a hair, but one that is won by a mile. And I think that that's what one of the big pieces that this is all about.
Yeah, I got the visual of an accumulation of chess pieces, just swiping them. We got a big pile over here, big pile of pieces. Scott McKay, how would you like to weigh in on China? Everyone calls it, the elephant in the room. We got to fear China when none of that seems to be the case. What's your view of the trip to China?
Well, I think as is mentioned here, the reality is that the true enemy is the city of London, right? China also is a proxy of the city of London as it's been set up for the last 25, 30 years, all the wealth that's come there and the innovation, the massive expansion of infrastructure economy. It came on the backs of the United States, taxpayer or otherwise. You think about the strategy of being chess, and I'm listening to these gentlemen talk, and I'm thinking, we want everybody in the world to win. We want these moves that are going to be made serve all of humanity. And you're thinking, how does that happen if we refocus our attention on the Western Hemisphere or the Americas? I mean, with the Americas, North, South, Central America, with the resources, the human capital, we need nothing from the East. We need nothing from anywhere else in the world, pretty much. So, and having better control of the flow of oil changes a lot of things. But let's say in that other hemisphere, there's a lack of, let's say there's a lack of energy resources, and maybe they do have to pay a premium rate or market rate, and it's taxing on them. So how is that fair to them? Because those people didn't do anything wrong. Well, the citizens. Well, if you look at it from this
Right.
perspective, and it brings me back to what Paul Zane Pilzer wrote a book back in the early '90s, 1992. He was a Wharton School graduate, like 19 years old, youngest vice president at Citibank at 26 years old, brilliant guy. And the point of his book was that technology itself solves all problems. Back in '72, the Club of Rome said we'd run out of oil and energy by 1999. Well, look where we are now, right? We have more oil resources, or the flow of it, than we ever have. And you say, well, how did that happen? Well, back then, we didn't have the answers we do today, or even in the preceding years from that. We weren't drilling 2 miles down, 6 miles sideways. We didn't have the fuel injector, which made it much more efficient, required, a whole lot less energy or oil, all those kind of things changed whenever people are allowed the freedom to be, use their genius. Mankind has this genius of solving problems. The innovation comes through technology, but it requires freedom. So you say, what's the opposite of freedom? You have freedom or slavery. The opposite of freedom is death. Point in any case in the world where people did not have freedom. All right. What did it always lead to? It didn't lead to slavery. That was a symptom. It always led to death. 100 million, 200 million people slaughtered throughout the 20th century by our own governments. But what happens is, if they can't compete with the power of the Western Hemisphere, resources or otherwise, it's going to force them to start thinking differently about how can we solve this problem if they don't have access to these resources. Well, if people are free and their minds are free, you'd be amazed what they can dream up. In fact, this is proof positive. Is this back in the early '90s? You had these the state of China, where it was then, fully controlled communist empire. They had two provinces, the Guangdong province and the Fujian provinces, were the first free enterprise zones in China. And it was so successful that it became the model and experiment that proved free enterprise is the best way to build a nation and economy, because they proved it. They had the freedom to do it. And of course, it led to where we are today. The thing I'm excited about is that if energy becomes an issue for those other countries, because we've shifted the balance of power of control to the Western Hemisphere, it forces them to come up with alternatives to that, which means the ingenuity is now on display. It's active. People are coming up with new ideas. So much so that this massive chess game is what? How do you all of a sudden pull the carpet of oil out from underneath the world to have another source of energy? You let it emerge under these trying conditions where people become the best version of themselves, create new technologies and ideas, and it eventually leads to 0 point energy. I've been saying this for the last couple of years, folks. We're doing what we're doing in this in the prism of life as we have it here on the planet. But I thought, why are we not commanding or demanding 0 point energy, which exists? Why are we not having access to the technologies of the quantum realm that give us all the power we need? And we're still focused on, an aspect of life here that produces energy for us, but it's destructive to the planet in many ways. So let's just say, to make that leap from where we are with energy to get us to a place where energy is completely free. Of course, we know what that does to the whole world. How do we get there? And a series of steps and sequences of the evolution, again, of man being free, freedom of mind to come up with solutions. And at the end of the day, once we get to that point where we have this free energy available to all of us, then the power will never be conglomerated in a group of a small amount of people who, quote unquote, run for, in governments, because there'll be no stopping the force of the human species when energy cannot be controlled anymore. Because with control of energy, even on an individual basis, once again, you can solve all problems because you have the means to create whatever technology or systems without that it can't be impeded. Pardon, I just had a little something went down the wrong pipe there.
Welcome to the club, the coughing club. Take a breather, Scott. I'll fill in some blanks. First off, thank you. That's great analysis and intriguing commentary. I took a few notes I'd like to follow up with. You know, 0 point energy, of course, you're 100% spot on. And you know, as you well know, we've got the Tesla technologies now. We also have, which we're going to close out this broadcast with, off-world technologies at our disposal. And I do believe that we will have 0 point energy. And as you stated just moments ago, what a relief that'll be for everyone on this planet. And pedaling back to your initial point, Scott, which I am glad you raised, because I didn't want it to come across that this panel, myself included, that we're insensitive to the struggles that unsuspecting citizens around the world, our brothers and sisters, are enduring during the geopolitical shuffle that's taking place. While there's division now, as these battles and shifts are taking place, ultimately, and I think our viewers can hear this and weave it together as they listen to Scott and others on the panel, this, all said and done, is actually going to, I'll use the word force, but maybe it's not the exact word, but you can fill in the blanks. It's going to force unity, not division. That's ultimately where it will lead us. And so great discussions. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to move us into the world of crypto. President Trump, I'm going to read some sound bites here. I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at the marker board, if you will, to fuel up the panel, to take some notes and comment on. But these are some news bites that I've been looking at and would like everyone to weigh in on. President Trump has stated, of course, say no to the central bank digital currency. He didn't say no to crypto or current cryptocurrency. He said the central bank's digital currency. So that said, he has also stated that the United States will be the crypto capital of the world. When President Trump says that, we need to listen and we need to watch. So we're going to get into that in the next few minutes. So let's discuss crypto. We'll begin with the Clarity Act. Has moved forward, I believe, out of the Senate Banking Committee, despite strong pushback from traditional folks. The banks have taken their masks off right now. They have no choice. But the gloves are off. They're fighting. They're struggling. But the momentum in the crypto world is unstoppable, sort of like AI. It's also been reported that the White House says it plans to remove unnecessary regulations, I like that, around Bitcoin and crypto as the U.S. continues to move forward toward a more innovative, friendly digital asset environment. I'll continue. Markets are viewing this as another positive signal for long-term crypto adaptation into the U.S. and into the global system. So shifting gears a bit, again, as I said, I'm going to throw a lot at the marker board and have you guys unpack what comes to mind. Trump's American Bitcoin, as I understand, is now the 15th largest Bitcoin treasury in the world. And it looks to me as though Eric Trump is at the helm of that. Meanwhile, the SEC is preparing to allow the U.S. stocks to begin trading in crypto. That's a lot to unpack there. I'm not a crypto expert. It's an area I'm learning as I go. And I'm learning from this panel. Let's start with Will Barney. We're talking about the seismic shift from a legislative and regulation standpoint concerning the bringing on of crypto into our lives. How would you like to break this down, Will? What do you see happening here?
Well, we've had some amazing things happen within the last week. First of all, Kevin Warsh gets Senate approved as our new Fed chairman. He is pro crypto. Okay. And then yesterday, Donald Trump issues 2 executive orders clearing the way for cryptocurrency to move forward. And he's telling the Senate, hey, get this law passed. Let's get the Clarity Act done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But these executive orders are moving things forward regardless of what the Senate does. So the Senate now has to try to back this up because he's now just moving forward with these executive orders to clear the path. What does this mean, though? It means that he wants to see decentralized distributed ledger technology, not centralized. And CBDC is centralized. So this is a very different approach. It's the centralization of control that has caused the slavery of the world. So he wants to remove that, where no one can ever again be that control in the system.
Mhm.
You know, Donald Trump got debanked in an epic way by three major
Yes,
banks, Chase among them, and he's under a lawsuit against them right now. He's suing them for billions of dollars. He had
as he should.
300 accounts debanked all on the same day. Now that's almost catastrophic to an enterprise like the Trump business. They had to scramble.
Mhm.
Fortunately, they this happened like on a Wednesday, and they had to make payroll by Friday. They have 48 hours to figure out how to get bank accounts up so that they could try to still make payroll for their employees. I don't know if they if they got the paychecks out on time, but the point being is nobody knows better about real world experience with centralized control in the banking world than Donald Trump. He's had to live it. So he's trying to move America into being at the forefront of technology and exploration, but making it available for all, decentralize it, let everybody have an open opportunity. Now, why do we need things like the Clarity Act? We need them because I have people contacting me all the time. I've been scammed out of my crypto, and I can't go after these companies because there's no law that says I'm protected. And it's thousands and thousands of dollars, right? So the crypto world sounds really good, but it's still a wild west without law and regulation. And this is why there's such a push right now, is to bring that regulatory authority into that space. I don't see us being able to launch new, shall we say, new treasury-backed currency and put it on blockchain rails if we haven't first protected those rails with a regulatory structure that protects the public. And so that's why I think this whole issue about the Clarity Act and what's going on with that is very important. I think the president wants it on his desk before the 4th of July. I think he wants it signed and done, but he went ahead and moved forward as he did yesterday with executive orders to fill in the gap, if you will, until that arrives.
Pardon me, folks. Thank you, Will. I had a comment to make there. Yeah, about regulation. You know, Trump's not a fan of overregulating. Look at what that did to us with unable to explore oil and gas in our own country. Oh, that's changed. But you do need some regulation. Otherwise, it's the wild, wild west, cowboys and Indians. And to the point you raised there, Will, about people getting hurt because they got no recourse. So opposition is there, but like everything else, this administration, namely President Trump, will find a way, legally and constitutionally, to set things right, and I'm looking forward to it. Bill, do you care to comment on the crypto space?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, definitely not my primary arena, as gold and silver tends to be that, and I defer to really, really smart people like Will. However, I would agree that I think there's two sides to it, right? On one hand, you need the correct protections in place. Otherwise, you risk the average, especially, a lot of people have never interacted with crypto in any way, shape, or form, but they understand that there's a future to this and they want to interact with it. And so these people are susceptible to be taken advantage of. And so I think that putting in the controls and the punishments in such a way here that people are protected is incredibly important, lest they be taken advantage of what has the potential to be a really positive thing. On the other hand, yeah, huge difference between something like a CBDC and because that's centralized, right, versus decentralized. The decentralization of money is one of the primary points here, right? Is we need to move and hopefully forever. That's one of the things that I think crypto allows here, is not just in the immediate, what we accomplish in this lifetime and maybe several lifetimes into the future, but potentially forever protect any singular entity, country, etc., from ever re-centralizing all money into one silo of control. So I think that it's really forward looking, because obviously a gold-backed currency and tokenization solves everything immediately for us, and that's great. But the decentralization of money via cryptocurrency solves the forever problem of not allowing any country or entity ever to accumulate so much power in such a way that they could ever repeat the damage that has been done. So I think that it's kind of a twofold thing. It's one hand, you set up a great structure for the now, but on the other hand, you make sure that what has been done can never be done again.
Thank you. I concur with all your points there. And I took a couple of quick notes to remind our viewers, those that remember 20 some odd years ago, maybe longer than that, the Dodd-Frank bill. Last time I checked, I think it's still the law of the land. Why do I invoke that? Well, there's a reason President Trump doesn't like a centralized system, which Will and Bill have laid out, which is what the central bank digital currency operates within. You have to enter in. I read some paragraphs a while back, maybe a year or so ago. Somebody sent to me of an actual Bank of America documents. Those 80 pages you sign when you set up an account that you never read. One of those pages, basically, alluded to what I would say is the Dodd-Frank bill. In the event of blah, 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 run on the banks, let's call it, it'll be the bank bail in, not the bank bail out. And even though we paid for the bailout too, this one you pay immediately because they can basically hold captive your money through their central bank digital currency system. I'm paraphrasing things. These are red flags. These are warnings along the highway for you. Also, another aspect of that is it's been discussed in certain circles that the bank system, central bank system, with their central bank digital currency may be deploying something quite similar to the Chinese credit scoring system. So, what Google searches you have and what political parties you support and what church you go to and where you go on Google may have an impact on your ability to actually access your own money. All right. So decentralization is the story. Thanks for inspiring all that thought, Bill. Scott, how would you like to weigh in on this? I know you've got a thing or two to say about this.
It's always great to be the last guy up because I get to listen to all the brilliance that these gentlemen play off of and sound smart with something that they said. I'm not a big crypto guy in terms of research or understanding, although I did buy some about a year and a half ago. Two people that really didn't need money reached out and said, "Hey, you really need to buy some XRP or whatever." And I thought, all right, I'll throw some into it. And I just forgot about it because don't really know much about it. 3 weeks later, it tripled. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Something must really work here. Did the smart thing, take your profits out just to be safe. Should have left them in there. But, the idea of cryptocurrency for me is that, we're doing away with the central bank, or at least, the major central banks. And now everybody can have a central bank. It's right here. There's your private bank, right? Not a central bank. There's your private bank. All right. You get your own private bank now. Eliminate the overhead and all the costs that come with the administrative side of the global banking system. For me, cryptocurrency, in terms of being used by governments, by the people, puts us again in that position of freedom where we can't be held up by banks or deplatformed because of your political views. Not only that, it becomes that massive expansion of our own thinking in the human species. Like what else? Where's my reach to use my currencies? How I can extend myself outside of any and all borders, whether it be making purchases here or abroad, getting money to people instantly. Funny thing is with the banking system as it is today, I try to get, even trying to get a GoFundMe account that I raise some money for somebody who's really been fighting a battle in Greece by himself, a journalist who's just, they've deplatformed him a million times, taken away his ability to make money and things. So we've raised money for him. I can't even get that money into his hands in Greece through GoFundMe, something like GoFundMe, or even try to get it out to somebody in London. So all of those things are the control systems of their architecture. And because we're obviously moving into crypto, I didn't really have a strong opinion for it as it started to emerge 10 years ago. But now how I see things have played out, specifically in the last 7 to 8 years when, this war opened up and a lot of people came into this space and have been punished in so many ways, it always comes back to, their ability to survive. And that comes from the banking system, having physical, dollars or US notes or fiat money, or even gold or silver, which I think is the real play in the world for safety and security. The more this moves forward, the more I realize how important crypto is going to be, and how, again, for me, I think always in terms of, does this lead to freedom? Freedom is the most critical thing that the planet needs and human species needs, because again, it leads us into that consciousness that we're not operating from lack, we're operating from abundance. And once you have abundance, you want everybody to have abundance. All this stuff becomes deconstructed in our minds psychologically if we all have access to it. Crypto gives us access to all of it outside of the controls of the banking system. So I'm going to pay more attention, and simply because Will brought it up and I can see the energy in his eyes talking about it, I'm thinking, yeah, I need to really start researching, the crypto and what's coming. He mentioned early on too about the attack of Ripple by the SEC, that actually being an operation. I never would have even thought of that. If that was all staged to get us to that place where we are now in time, where it can become something that can be utilized, man, I'm pretty happy, because I did buy a nice chunk of crypto, and it sounds like the future is going to be really built on that axis.
Thank you, Scott. To our audience, Scott remembers this. I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, whenever it was. Scott and I, we talk periodically. Marathon Patriot shop talk discussions, just Scott and I on Zoom. And it was you, Scott, who said to me, John, I had these sources. I threw some money in XRP and XLM. You might want to take a look at that. Well, thank you for that, Scott. And I followed suit. I own some crypto now. Still, I'm on the low end of the totem pole of the knowledge, but thanks to Will Barney and Josh Reed and many other folks, John Dowling, Rob Cunningham, and others, I'm learning so much more about it. But I feel very comfortable with my XRP. But also, Scott, you spoke about scarcity and abundance. We, of course, everyone knows, our Creator intended us to live in a world, not just financial resources, all resources, in a world of abundance, not scarcity. And scarcity was created by the demonic, satanic, dark forces of which are now losing control in this spiritual battle, which is why we're having this broadcast. Everything comes under that umbrella, as you folks well know. And the boots of tyranny are coming off of our necks right now. And you wouldn't think that this would be the discussion points, talking about crypto, but it is. It makes all the sense in the world. I want to go back to Will just for one follow-up on crypto, just to Will, and then we're going to talk about gold and UFOs and conclude our broadcast. I thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Will, I don't expect you to have the list in front of you or remember all 7, 8, or 9 of them, but it's very important. People ask me all the time questions, and we've covered it before. You spoke about cryptos that you would favor and why. You spoke about ISO compliant, and you rattled off some of those that are in that space. Do you care to share off the top of your head that you may not be prepared fully for that narrative for our viewers? It's very important. Thank you.
Well, the importance is when we're talking about ISO specification, what we're referring to is ISO 20022. This is a particular specification it specifies how a financial transaction should be properly recorded. And so we favor the coins, the crypto coins that are actually compliant with this standard, because the whole world's moving to this standard. And if everybody's trying to settle, see, it's interesting. If let's say you had 5 different blockchain networks, but if they all record their transactions identically the same using this standard, you now have interoperability between these networks. This is why it's important that we achieve certain standards. So there is 9 coins that are currently compatible with that are compliant with the ISO specification. So XRP, XLM, Solana, HBAR, there's a couple of other ones. Anyway, but you look it up, you can Google it, and you'll see all 9 that are listed there. But it's important that we stay with those specifications if we want good interoperability. Now, history was actually made last week in the crypto space, and a lot of people maybe have missed this, but we had the first time where treasuries were tokenized and they were settled using outside investment money across borders. So we had basically tokenized treasury move to a buyer outside the country, who paid for that transaction and received the token of the Treasury, and the entire thing closed in about 10 seconds. That has never been done before. And in fact, if any of you have ever been involved with trying to deal with Treasuries and move them through the SWIFT system, it's painfully slow. Okay, it can take you days to get this kind of thing done. The fact that that could be closed in 10 seconds or less is incredible. And it tells you that in the future, can you imagine the speed of trade around the world when you can settle right now within seconds and you're not having to wait? The problem with our current financial system, the reason it's so porous, the reason that people have so much challenge with it, is because the slower money moves, the more hands in the cookie jar that can play with that money on its path of movement, right? And the system was designed that way so that all the bankers could all get their piece of the pie. This is why you had things like 48-hour settlement. Sending bank could play with it a day, and the receiving bank can play with it for a day before the recipient gets the money, right? Everybody, in their minds, everybody wins. Well, they win, but the consumer isn't winning. So then when you look at blockchain space, we're in this peer-to-peer type of environment where I can send directly to Scott or to Bill or to you, John, and we can do that person to person. We don't need banks anymore. We're sending directly over the network, and this is going to be transformative of our world. Now, I'm not a fan of there being, control grids or somebody being able to take control of this and control everything. So I'm still a proponent of we need cash. We need, the third of the world is not even bankable right now. It doesn't have a bank account. So people need to understand that. So it's not like we can ditch, paper currency, but we can begin to move in a place where I think we can maneuver directly with one another in a way that is powerful and is going to take away all that middleman. It saves us money and it saves us time, and we become happier when that happens.
You bet. Crawl, walk, run comes to my mind. You mentioned, Will, never been done before, that Treasury settling in a matter of 10 seconds or something of the sort. The never been done before, we're going to be a lot of never been done befores happening day by day on multiple fronts of life and living for the human race. And I'm so glad to be here during this period of time because God is in control. And so is President Trump and this administration. Well, this military, I should say. 95% of Congress probably won't be here in less than 2.5 years. And thank goodness for that. And that's for a different conversation for another day. Let's talk about gold. The show's moving into hour 2 or hour and a half plus. I got 2 more subjects I'd love for this panel to weigh in on. We're going to talk about gold and silver, and we're going to talk about UFOs as it relates to the economy. Okay, so gold will destroy the Fed. Who said that? Oh, yeah, 17. Q, the greatest open source military intelligence operation of our time, said gold will destroy the Fed. So, we see that happening, and its little sister cousin called silver. So why is gold and silver rising? We've covered this before, but again, new people piling in by the minute, and number of times over, for those that have heard this before, equals certainty. And why is it worthy of reporting? It's how we're going to back our currency. Kind of important. And the opportunity, remember I mentioned in the beginning, GFR, Global Financial Reset, surviving, yes, all the elements of danger, and thriving through the transition. Gold is your thriver. Why is gold and silver rising? We'll start with Will Barney. We'll take it to our metals expert in a moment. Why is it pulling back? When will it catapult? And will new Fed policy create inflation or deflation? I mean, I'm unpacking a lot here, and what impact might that have on both gold and silver? There are other factors that may trump that completely because of the extraordinary things that are taking place with the banks and the naked shorts. I threw a lot there, but Will, you can take that on if you will, please.
My opinion on gold and silver is that if you're looking at a resource that works in the old economy and works in the new economy and makes this transition, that is one, okay? That's definitely going to land you on the other side. What we've been seeing is a cleaning out of manipulation If you look at the COMEX, had the COMEX been running on blockchain, you wouldn't have a 300-to-1 paper contracts, right?
Mm,
Where there's 300
wow. Yep.
paper or 350 paper ounces of silver to an actual ounce of silver. Those things couldn't exist if you were on blockchain, because the blockchain tells you whether there's a physical token there or not, right? You can't fake it. It's not like you can naked short sell or anything on it. So this is why I think you're going to see things, commodities such as gold and silver. I think you'll eventually see them tokenized, because it's going to represent, and those tokens probably will represent the serial number of the actual item, right? That's being held in reserve for that. So as you look at gold and silver, I said it's manipulation. So we've had all this paper market manipulation going on a long time. In the end of January, Trump issued an executive order stating that he wanted to look at the critical minerals list, and he wanted a report done within 180 days on setting price floors for critical minerals. And at the top of that list was silver. Okay. That we hit that 180 days on the 13th of this coming July. So we saw a couple of things transpire over this last month. In March, there was a whole bunch of contracts that potentially could have stood for delivery. And in those last days of February, right before they could have stood for delivery, we had a shutdown of COMEX for an hour and a half. And when it turned back on, thousands of contracts were gone. Now, what we did see is a whole bunch of contracts got added on to May. And some of them may be even further out, but May got really loaded up with contracts. So it avoided the run on the bank, so to speak, right? Where there's not enough physical to pay out. And so we got through March. And then we had, in May, we had a very interesting phenomenon happen right at the end of April as people were about to stand for delivery. We didn't have a shutdown, but we had some incredible things take place where a lot of the contracts that were in the open interest column, in other words, they could stand for delivery. They had interest to stand for delivery. They just up and settled their accounts and walked away. We had 60+% of open interest contracts left the casino here in May. What does that tell you? It tells you they know there's not physical metal backing it, and they're not going to play the game anymore because the gig's about to be up. So what does this mean for pricing? We had this manipulation has brought the price down temporarily, but it can't stay at that level, not when there's this much push going on. Bill talked earlier about the price of gold, staying in a lower position. This is actually advantageous. There are rumors going around that during this standoff in the Strait of Hormuz, we had an operation called Operation Freedom, where we were going to escort some ships through and let them through. And we did. We let some ships through within a couple of days, and then the operation was suspended again. So the rumor is that there were multiple ships that were let through the Strait of Hormuz loaded with gold from Saudi, headed to America, and that they got through, and then it closed up again. Now, I'm not here to speculate rumor because we don't have validation of that. But if that's going on, it tells you that there's still a lot of pressure from governments around the world to solidify their gold holdings, because everybody knows this currency is moving to asset backed, and there's nothing that can stop it. We're on a trajectory where you're going to go asset backed or you're left behind. And so every country is really working very hard now to balance that situation. Price staying down helps the positioning, but it can't stay there for long. And I think it's moving in an upward direction out of just the pressure of it all.
Brilliant analysis. Thank you, Will. Couple of follow-ups. 300 ounces of paper to get an ounce of silver. Boy, was Q spot on. We're using gold in the metals component. Gold, precious metals, I would inject, will destroy the Fed. And that's exactly what we see happening. And back to your little soundbite from a moment ago that I've grabbed is a lot of these never been done befores are happening. This is one of them. And lastly, I really appreciate the why. You've given us the why behind the gold and silver story. And on the golden, pardon me, folks, I can not do the show or do the show and cough periodically. Pardon me, but it'll pass. Bill, talk about the gold and silver story. It is a big story. It is among the biggest stories within the financial space. Spend some time on this, if you will. And of course, I'll close out asking you your forecast, year end and forward, and why. Take it away, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So, historically here, we would be looking at things like Fed policy and some other, points just to drive, what is gold and silver going to do. But at this point, the primary drivers for metals are fundamentally different, right? Because we're in never uncharted territory. So, and they're for different reasons. Silver, and I think, I won't rehash what Will said because I think he hit the nail pretty much on the head there. But ultimately, you've got, naked shorting, leverage, et cetera. Banks have a tremendous amount of outstanding, debt essentially that they have issued in terms of silver that is worth far more than they've issued or loaned it out for, and so they're at a tremendous disadvantage here, and a point here where some of them have already taken their lumps, some will take much bigger lumps, and so that continues to be an ongoing battlefront that occurs. And so, one thing I always remind people, particularly with silver, is that whether this bubble or this all comes to fruition, the truth finally, relays itself when we see silver at $200-300, whether that or more, whether that happens today, tomorrow, or a year from now, really is irrelevant in terms of people that are deciding to do something with metals, unless you've got something else that is going to produce 4 or 5 iterations of itself in a year, then by all means. But otherwise, whether that's if I told you it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 2 years, really any of those would be, you'd be ecstatic for. I mean, silver's already up 130% just in the last 12 months alone. So we're seeing this incredible trajectory on metals. Silver, again, driven largely by institutional shorting and then institutional demand. The fact that, again, it is on the critical minerals list. China is not letting silver out of their borders. The entire world, if you have a first world economy that relies on anything that involves technology, you need silver. And frankly, we're not digging enough of it out. It's not even necessarily profitable at the numbers it's at now for miners to be pulling it up. So it's largely created as a byproduct of when they're looking for other metals. So there's still a fundamental disconnect between where the price of silver is and where it needs to be just in a functional economy. So in that way here, that will rectify itself as soon as, again, that entire system implodes, which is connected to a lot of the stuff we talk about. It's not an isolated incident. It's one part of much more. On the gold side, you're seeing, again, this accumulation. And Will talked a little bit about, potentially incoming gold from Saudi, among the ships there. And I think that just for context for people, and these are numbers here that were, if this a year or so old. So I'm sure Trump has been accumulating in the meantime, and how much he's gotten. Obviously, we don't have those numbers, but I'll give you some context of where this stood, maybe a year ago. Is LBMA, so the London Bullion Market Association, which, as we've mentioned before, is really the key enemy here, had about 9,300 tons of gold on hand at any given time, and the U.S. at this point had about 8,100. So at that point, LBMA had more gold than the entire U.S. combined. Now you look at China, was about 2,000 tons or so. So altogether here, even with China, we're just, I talk about that force superiority or fire superiority, and you think about, wow, that's not even with all of China's gold as well, you don't actually have that much more than LBMA. So I think one of the key elements here that has kept gold down is that there is from this administration, there is a real desire to continue to accumulate gold before it does spike up to 10, 12, 15, 20,000, and we talk about the revaluation of gold being, I've heard projections in the 20 to 24,000 an ounce range. So even at those numbers here, there is a real benefit to the United States and a real trade tactic that is, we want to continue to accumulate this at current market rates, not at the future rates that it will be revalued to or that it will go to. So I am actually a believer on silver. Again, I think it's a lot of suppression. On gold in particular, I think that the administration is happy if there's any manipulation because they're getting gold at a far lower rate than they might otherwise. And again, I mentioned this conflict as being another thing. as countries are forced to sell gold to keep their economies afloat, the United States is happy to continue to absorb that. And there's many other instances where we're acquiring gold in a lot of places. And obviously, the audit of Fort Knox, has been ongoing. I'm sure the results of that is something that Trump does have and has played into his plan about, again, accumulation. So all of that is ongoing, but at some point we and I think that that's very, very soon, we reach a point where we have met that accumulation. We have enough gold to accomplish to be the superpower in this way that we want to be the main driver of this new economic order, so to speak. And so in that way, we get to a point where at that point the floodgates open, right? There's no more games to play. True price discovery is unleashed, and or revaluation. And that's where you see gold at 10, 12,000, relatively quickly, very, very quickly. You see silver again finally break the chains of dishonest money and naked shorting into the I would say well in excess of $200. In the immediate future here, well in excess of $100. And then at that point we even get a little bit of probably an overshoot. I would say it's very realistic that silver overshoots its true value, because everyone will be looking around at silver going from 70 or so dollars now to 150 to 250 to 350, and it will be one of those things, I'm sure, that everyone at the barber shop, they always say when your barber starts buying it, that's when you should get out, when they're talking about it. And I think we'll reach that point at some point it'll overshoot even, but at this point we're very, very, very early, and if you can take advantage of that, particularly in the mindset of not just surviving, but thriving, I think that's an awesome place to be. You get an asset that makes it through this transition, but also grows for you, which is very rare that you get the two of those in one asset type.
Yeah, and completely liquid. Great analysis. I've got a few follow-ups, very important. Thank you, Bill. Will spoke about the floor based on a bill that we'll hear about later in, I think you said July or something, minerals list, silver being on there. So we're talking about a floor, perhaps in gold and silver. Then we do know that the Fed has, I think, you can correct me, anybody on the panel if I'm wrong, has gold priced at $42 an ounce on their books. Talk about craziness, fraud, and complete deception, and a bunch of BS. Where gold's trading at what, 4,600, give or take a few dollars. And these are low numbers based on what you just shared with us, Bill. So you speak about the floor. So now we're entering regulation into the precious metals component, which has never really been, as far as I know, other than RICO laws. You can't buy it with cash and all that kind of stuff. But, so now we have floors. And why? Because it plays such an important role in the future of sound money. That's why, folks. And so we've got floor prices now. I'm a fan of that. I'm also a fan of what you just shared with us, Bill, about gold being being as high as 10 or 15,000, and information being floated that it could go even much higher than that. And you're talking about a relatively short period of time. You talk about opportunity knocking at the door, folks. If you're still sitting in the old paradigm system with your stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, with the Wall Street brokers and bankers advising you and paying all your undisclosed fees that you don't have a clue about. And again, there'll be a time and place. There'll be a time and place for stocks and bonds again. But I'll tell you, you're looking for an opportunity right now. Gold and silver is shining very, very bright. It just is. It's irrefutable at this point, based on all the information that both Will and Bill have shared. I want to go to Scott, and maybe have a quick follow-up with you, Bill. Then we're going to wrap up this broadcast with UFOs and a comment from Tim Burchett. Scott McKay, what's your take on both gold and silver, its role today, or anything that you've been listening to that you'd like to comment on the shiny metal?
Well, I've been watching the USDebtClock.org site for a while now. I've been doing a couple shows on it with some people that have been really dialed into it for quite some time. And there's a meme. If you go to USDebtClock.org, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, there says secret window, open and close. You click it on, it brings up whatever meme that they decided to put out. that day. There's one here. There actually on that clock or below it, it will show like a free book. It's a PDF download, and it's kind of like a children's coloring book. There's information in there. There's a lot of fun pictures to kind of create the view or the picture of where we are with silver and gold. And this one that I'm looking at right here, it's kind of fun because you have this cartoon character. It's like a homeless guy standing on the street. He's got a beard. He's got a sign, and he's holding up the sign, and it says, "Will work for food" is crossed out, comma, fiat currency crossed out, comma, or gold in big letters. And then it says, "But I prefer silver." So I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty direct assessment of where the powers that be see where it belongs right now. Yes, we'd all like to have some gold. I'm fortunate that I was able to buy some gold, bought a hell of a lot more silver than gold in the last couple of years, and thankfully so, because again, it certainly wasn't in my wheelhouse or education system. I just followed the lead of brighter people, much people very astute like Bill is here, and certainly, folks, you really need to reach out to Bill Armour ASAP and get a consult, because what you will learn is that everybody should be in precious metals. I don't care what, if you only have a tiny amount of it, because there's some amazing things going to happen. When we look at, there's been a war on silver for 150 years, not gold, but silver for 150 years now. What does that tell you? That this is a dangerous metal for these powers that have enslaved the planet through this monetary system and seizure of assets. So obviously big moves are going to be made. We witness it here. We started buying silver in the low 20s. Some of my audience were buying like in the high teens at some point when we started engaging it. And we saw this rocket ship take off last December roughly. And, God, from that point where it was at $30 and just starts banging up to 60, 90, 120 before it settled back down, likely because of the release of all these sale of all these paper contracts. I do understand from Juan told me that if they didn't do that, it allow this to happen where they crashed it, that probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the biggest banks would have failed by this fall and would have been catastrophic to the economy. So when you're talking about those type of things, what does that tell you on the importance of silver? That if they didn't allow this, basically this ongoing criminal move that's been made before, made to course correct this as sharply as they did, that it would be catastrophic for this economy, possibly the world economy. So in my opinion, as I continue to look this landscape, silver seems to me to be that biggest play for the obvious, supply and demand reasons and everything else. But if I just read on this site that if I don't know how many 1% or 2% of the people in the world bought 1 ounce of silver, we would see very quickly what the real price of it is, which would be 10 to 20% of what gold is. Now, for gold, let's just say, for today's purposes, gold is in a range of, let's just say, call it 5,000 on the high side. It's a few $100 lower than that. You just think about having an ounce of silver, a 1 ounce silver coin, all of a sudden becomes worth $500, 1,000. Earlier this year, Wells Fargo put out a document. By the end of the year, they think it'll be around $1,180. I think it was J.P. Morgan Chase thought within a certain period of time this year that it was going to go to 300 to 500. You listen to Bill talking about going to 100 pretty quickly, and then shortly thereafter 200. There's all this information and all this attention on silver for the reasons that we know. And if there's this much talk about it, and actual criminal activity being allowed to continue by the federal government in this space where it's happening to make sure the economy doesn't collapse or banks do not collapse, be catastrophic, then that tells me that silver is still that very important primary play. And from an investment standpoint, if you see where the light is, where the attention is, where the energy is, where the conversation, the narrative is, you should pay attention to that. And if it's as broad of a conversation across the whole spectrum of economics and geopolitics, and social systems, then that means there's something really important about it, and a big move coming or a big play being made on silver, basically the course correction of where it should be. So obviously very fortunate I'm on the smart decision making end of having invested in precious metals in the last 4 or 5 years. But you can't go wrong with either one of them. And the fact that all other types of trade or currencies have been created by man, these two were created by our creator. So I don't see how you go wrong.
Great points. Thank you, Scott. And you mentioned J.P. Morgan Chase or the central banks. They're aboard now. They have no choice. They have no choice. When these leftist bankers that put us in this mess have to say these things and make the moves that they're making, that just closes the lid on the jar. It just tells you everything you need to know. So buy gold, buy silver, buy now. I will say buyer beware, and I'll save that for when we release our panel from the show. I'll cover some of those points later and direct you to some free educational sources on that. But let me. The show's moving along. I've got to wrap up. Let's talk about UFOs briefly. Obviously, there's so much we can discuss on that from other perspectives. We'll save that for other broadcasts that I'll be hosting. And again, folks, I'll be hosting Off-World with JMC, launching later in June, a monthly panel of experts and people that have had experiences with off-planet entities, people with a lot of credibility, like retired Lieutenant Colonel Delta Forces Chuck Sellers, for example. And we're talking with Alex Collier, I think, to try and bring him into the premiere episode. So stay tuned. We're putting it together. But right now, as this is a financial show, I want to speak about Tim Burchett claims new UFO files could reveal a cover-up involving zero-point energy technology. Again, as I alluded to earlier, Tesla and off-planet technologies are coming here. Thank you, President Trump. We know about these UFO files since Dwight Eisenhower. By the way, I spoke with Jerome Corsi quite a bit about this. You'll want to watch that episode Friday at 6. But, we're talking about files that have been top secret. We've known about them, but it never becomes an issue during the every 4-year debates, right? It's just not discussed. Well, it needs to be discussed. We're at the point of disclosure. We're at the point of living in a world of truth. And those truths are being brought to us, thank you, by President Trump and this administration. So anyway, zero-point energy, Tim Burchett. What do you see, Will Barney, the impact potentially of off-planet technologies coming here as it relates to the economy?
Well, we used to call them UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and now they got a new word. It's UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Nevertheless, okay, it's advanced technology. And I think key to that is things like zero-point energy. Nikola Tesla had zero-point energy back in the 1930s. Of course, all that was buried. But a friend of mine, the CEO of a company called Z-Power, they've been working for 10 years to bring zero-point energy to the market. It looks like it'll be delivered early next year. So incredible things, imagine a box the size of a carry-on suitcase, giving you 10,000 watts continuously to power your house. And it's all solid state, right? There's no moving parts. There's no bearings to grease. It's incredible type of technology. And we're going to see this kind of stuff come to its own here. I think the time is perfect. They wanted to bring this out sooner, but actually the timing is more perfect, because I think had they done this 10 years ago, their lives would probably be in jeopardy. But the reality is, I think everybody's looking for this. The reason Donald Trump has pushed so hard on the oil front and opening up the oil fields, you have to understand, is even with the release of technology, advanced technology like zero-point energy, it will take a number of years before everybody has a device, before it's prolific enough. And in that meantime, you can't just shut off your energy needs. So Donald Trump is doing a good job to help, I think, grease the wheels of transition, if you will. Make sure there's cheap, inexpensive oil for the long haul while we transition into newer technology, because it will take a number of years for devices to be manufactured and put out there. And it will take its time to transition. But I think the world's at a place right now where we see these things moving around. They're clearly moving at speeds that are unheard of, which means they're using anti-gravity technology as well. And so, and if you look at the patents, they say that there's over 6,000 patents that were hidden under DOD classified files. In those patents is anti-gravity and is zero-point energy and all this stuff, okay? So it's going to come out. It's going to be something we're going to have a lot of discussion in for the next several years. And congratulations, John, on getting ahead of this and actually bringing it to the forefront. I think people should know it's available, and it should be available for us. There's no reason that we should go hundreds of years doing the same old thing that we've been doing. We've been doing combustion engines for a long time. And particularly when there's advanced things that could move us faster, easier, less expensive in the future. And energy is probably the biggest topic around the world. Everything runs on energy in our entire world. And if you can bring the cost of that down and make that reasonable and cheap, it really changes economics in such a massive way that I think that we're going to see a couple of things take place in the future. I think we're going to see income surge, and I think we're going to see expenses be reduced. We're going to start reversing what we've been going into, which is this giant squeeze of economic struggle. And I think we're going to reverse all that, particularly with the advancement of the new technology.
Thank you, Will. You know, again, to all of those and all of us that are struggling, being under the boots of tyranny and being debt slaves our whole lives, just know that help is on the way. You're talking about, and this isn't me saying, I'm paraphrasing our administration and our president and our panel and other people. No income tax, no property tax, no tax on tips. There's probably many more I'm missing. You're talking about
Overtime.
0 point energy, overtime. You're talking about repatriation of wealth. You're talking about Elon Musk saying in a few years there'll be no reason to save money. There'll be no need to work. You can if you choose. You take all of these things, and of course the trading of the birth certificate and all those calculations. When you put all that out there, don't you tell me help isn't on the way. Help is on the way, folks. Hang in there a little bit longer, because this is incredible. And you mentioned energy being such an important subject to make the world go around. I remember a dinner, a 5-hour dinner I had at Trump International in Las Vegas many years ago with our good friend Juan Savin. And it was then, way back then, that I learned that energy, well, where do you think the 17th letter, the greatest open source military operation of our time, Q, was formed, based, and run out of? The Department of Energy. So it is slightly important. Anyway, thank you, Will Barney. We're going to wrap up the panel. We're discussing the benefit of 0 point energy, UFOs. Bill, any comments about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my thoughts there is just, it goes back to, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the program, unity, not division, right? And really the idea of plenty versus scarcity is the fact that we don't have access to something like that is by virtue of it's not profitable or advantageous for the cabal to allow access to these technologies. I think healthcare is the same way, obviously creating the sickness there, treating it as far more profitable. So the entire reality in which we exist right now is a construct, in a sense, in which they can sort of farm this debt slavery. So when that is broken, we enter into like a completely different reality that we're not used to, right? And it really is that livelihood of plenty versus scarcity. So I think that we're going to see that change. I think that we're going to see healthcare change. I think that a lot of the systems that people are so accustomed to, and that we kind of just accept as necessary evils, so to speak, will change dramatically. And so this is just kind of, I think, part of the wider conversation about what will change in the foreseeable future and what's to come. And so the hope that people have really is not limited to or tied only to just the financial restructuring, but I think as a grand narrative here, everything is going to change. Everything will be improved in one way or another. And energy, obviously, as a cost, right? Energy influences everything, right? Whether food you eat at the grocery store, anything that you get, anything that you interact with, there's been a price that energy has paid into that. And if suddenly you can cut dramatically the energy cost, you cut dramatically the labor, so to speak, that it takes to create something. And therefore people have, again, we go back to that reality of plenty. So I think that we're heading that direction. And I think that these kind of technologies will be accessible once those barriers are removed to them.
Yes, well said. Very important. Great change and good change is coming our way. and energy plays a major role in that. You invoked the word healthcare a few times. I'll take advantage of that for a moment. JMC Broadcasting, I believe it's June 26th, but it's definitely in the month of June. You know, we report on military, intelligence, economic, with experts, lean and mean. That's been our focus. And we're now bringing in the same template, same format. We're going to be covering healthcare the way we did at American Media Periscope back in the day. And the show host, the woman, I'm going to hold all the names back at the moment, someone you know and love very much, great reporter. He's going to be covering healthcare just the way we cover military, intelligence, and economic reporting here. We know all the doctors, all the best scientists, the film producers, Mickey Willis, all of them. They're all coming aboard. Weekly shows, monthly panels. We're taking on healthcare. We're taking on legislation of healthcare. We're taking on Nuremberg 2.0 for those healthcare criminals. We're trying to talk about how we can be healthy the right way. We're going to be talking about med beds, scalar technologies, frequency healing, and so forth and so on. So stay tuned, folks, coming the end of June right here at JMC Broadcasting. We'll close out the panel with Scott McKay, your commentary on energy and UFOs and off-planet technology.
Well, they're all one and the same to me. You know, about 10 years ago is when I walked into that space of the secret space programs, their whistleblowers coming out and revealing all these things, which interestingly enough, it's kind of what brought on this real spiritual sort of progression and this leap for me. The idea that the off-planet stuff that's going on, the interaction with non-terrestrial species, billions of years more advanced than we are, who has an interest in our spiritual ascension, tells us a lot about what we are as a species, how special we are, and the fact that we've been enslaved in this planet by the quarantine of high-level technologies. To me, is again another axis which is going to change the human experience here. If you just can contemplate this idea that there's quadrillions of dollars of investment in off-planet architecture and infrastructure and the ability to travel, you know, into other systems, star systems, whatever. We're an interstellar race now. I mean, we were supposed to progress to that, but you know, the bad guys that come from this planet have been doing these things for a very long time. And the fact that the disclosure is now right around the corner, to me, tells me that the grip of power by this cabal machine is completely fractured forever. I said this for many years. The one weapon, their greatest weapon that they've ever had to keep them in a position of power is their veil of secrecy. It's not only damaged, it's gone, it's wiped out. So now the truth will emerge. And now that the truth is emerging, there's going to be a lot of questions people are going to ask, like, hey, why this? Why not? You know, how did this happen? All of these things that could have changed the human experience for many people that lost people they care about, family members, loved ones, because these technologies have been sequestered, is going to really change the consciousness of the planet, where they'll now be demanding these things because of this mass awareness. When Trump came forward in his first term and he announced that we were creating a sixth branch of the military going to be called Space Force, man, that day when he said that, I was like, holy Mary, Mother of God, here we go. So why? Well, because my view is that as this off-planet war has been going on for a long time, just like the on-planet war with the same factions, your cabal and the alliance powers, if the alliance powers off planet have won and they're now commanding or they're seizing all of the off planet architecture in whatever capacities they are and what they can do to contribute to humanity, how do you bring that out to people where the psyche can actually process and assimilate this without breaking? Not possible. I mean, that's why we've seen this thing walk so slowly when everybody wants it over with, this whole emergence of all of these things that now humanity's starting to learn about. If you drop it on them on top of their head and they don't understand it, we as a species will just like walk away. I don't want to hear that. I don't believe that. They just shut down. It's just too big of a leap. So you got to do it slowly. How do you show, like if you listen to William Tompkins talk about every single thing taught on this planet in every education institution is a lie. He said it multiple times. He's 94. Every single thing taught in every education institution on this planet is a lie. Imagine waking up one day and realizing everything you've ever thought is not true. Create mass psychosis on the planet. But if you are going to introduce these things to humanity, it's a lot easier if you say, we have a new branch called Space Force. So in the first craft that may be 6 miles long and 2 miles wide and looks like a massive aircraft carrier, like in the movie um, Captain America, rising up out of a canyon 6 miles long. Those things exist. How do you say, hey folks, look what we have now, or look what we captured? But people just, it'd be in a state of disbelief. But now that the whole concept of Space Force is there, and all the things that led up to that, at least of programming or conditioning our minds, Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate, all these things preparing us for this, it's a lot easier of a transition when you see something that you can't believe exists. Instead of it being something that's too big to handle, it becomes a cheerleading session. Wow, look what Space Force created, right? So you start introducing these technologies through this new concept, this new apparatus called Space Force. Well, it's like, how do we act in America? How do we behave when America does something amazing? Look what we did. It's sort of a pat on the back. How exciting, what this greatest country in the world has produced. So to me, Trump announcing Space Force, for me, was the big initial step toward disclosure, because they have to introduce to the world these unbelievable technologies. Where did they come from? Oh, they've been here forever. Oh, really? How come we didn't have it? I lost my mom and dad. You'd have total chaos, anarchy. You'd have breakdown of social systems. You'd have people wanting to kill everybody on the planet who is responsible for hiding this stuff from us. But if it becomes the emergence of this new enterprise called Space Force, look how fast we're moving. Now people can accept it, and it becomes exciting and creates happiness versus anger and resentment, because we didn't have these things, a long time ago. Could have made life different. But to me, that was the true tipping point, was announcing that this new branch was coming, Space Force.
Thank you, Scott McKay. That is so well said, and a great way for us to close out the panel. My follow-up to that is, again, when I sat down with Jerome Corsi just yesterday, it'll publish Friday, he talked about, alluded to the initial formation of the Space Force, which became what it is today, all the way back to JFK, and he shared some insights to that. So once again, JFK the starter, President Trump the finisher, and you raised some great points there about the responsible layout and make it palatable for all of us to prevent complete meltdown and to welcome it. You laid that down so well. And so with that, we're going to conclude conclude the program. This has been the longest GFR show we've done. I thank our panel for staying around, and my two producers, and all of you watching. We could go on for hours. I'd love to reconvene this panel periodically. It's been great having you join us, Scott McKay, on the Will and Bill Hour. Thank you very much. And so we'll go to the top. Will, Barney, best place for people to follow you and your work.
Great. Thank you, John. Yes, you can follow us at enochgs.com. You can see it right there on the screen. That is our website. What we do is we are here to provide infrastructure for the launch of humanitarian projects. So we're building out digital software and data systems to allow the launching of projects across the world. We're trying to build an infrastructure that can handle the launch of thousands of new companies per year based upon new technology and benevolent objectives. And so we're here to help each of the humanitarians take their ideas and turn it into a business. That's what we're here for. And we hope to be at this work for many years to come. So it's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Will. You're a tremendous asset to the broadcasting I do, and what a project you're working on. And we're going to be following it each and every other week when you join us. Thank you. Bill Armour, best way to people to reach out to you for a free consultation to assist them in their IRAs or outside of their IRAs in acquiring both gold and or silver.
Yeah, absolutely. Two best ways are going to be my phone number, which is right there, and that comes directly to me. That's 310-407-0239. Phone call, just reach out. I'd be happy to get right to you as soon as, obviously, I get to other people in line. But generally have time to give a call back in the same day and go through whatever your situation is and figure out, what steps we might take or what options are available to you. And then obviously the other way, just reach out, jmcgenesismetals.com, which I believe is on the screen right there. People can go right there. They can submit. We can get you an information a packet there to start, whatever is preferable for people. But I do recommend a phone call to take it from there and tailor. You're just speaking directly with me, not some random person, and we can go through your situation.
Thank you very much, Bill Armour. And closing out with Scott McKay, I know you have a website and also a very popular Rumble channel. What's the best place that you'd like to direct our new followers? And many of our audience knows you well for many years, but a lot of folks don't. How can people connect up with you and your podcast, your work that you're doing, and may perhaps meet you as you tour the country?
Go to, because of the safe bet of who you're really seeing or talking to. If I tell you to just run a search engine on Patriot Streetfighter, you'll find about 100 of them, or Scott McKay, you'll find another 100 of those, and they're usually trying to bilk you for money or whatever. So the safe thing is to go right to patriotstreetfighter.com. Across the top, you'll see the social media links. We primarily, because I've been kicked off of YouTube 38 times, we do everything on Rumble. So to get to that Rumble channel, to make sure you get to the right one, to subscribe to it, if you'd like to, just go to the URL, PSF for Patriot Street Fighter, although Street Fighter is one word for trademark reasons. Just go to psfrumble.com. You'll land right on my page, and that's the real me. And otherwise, you can look on Patriot Street Fighter and catch those. But I will say this, do not, anybody that's asking you for money or, sell you QFS accounts or donate to a orphanage in Canada, stuff like that, on my behalf, if you don't hear me say it, see me say it on my channel, don't believe any of these fraudsters. And just to back up what Bill's working on, I would say, if me personally, this is for you folks, me personally, I had an IRA or 401k, or I would say, if me personally, I was a financial advisor, which I'm not, but if I were, I'd say, get the hell out of the markets right now and get everything into silver and gold.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott. And I want our audience to know, remember I spoke about earlier, Conversations of Consequence, where I feature some of the important voices of our time and learn about their life and their journey and what led them to who they are, and have them weigh in on the current events. I've had Patrick Byrne in there, and General Valet, Juan O'Savin, Mary Fanning, so many people I can't even remember at this moment. Scott McKay not only was in Conversations of Consequence once, but twice. Once when I launched it many years ago, and relatively recently when I relaunched it through JMC Broadcasting. You'll want to learn about the fascinating journey of the trials and tribulations and massive successes and triumphs of Scott's life. So Conversations of Consequence, you'll find that at JMC Broadcasting and on our Rumble channel. I want to thank this panel very, very much. I can't wait to see what the show note comments have been from our team that's been looking and playing with that. But this has been a very powerful, enlightening, informative, and positive episode from three great gentlemen. I appreciate you all being here very much. I'll be right back, folks, after this important announcement.
Module 2 is the cornerstone of content in the Wealth Coach University. In this module, you will learn just how to goots, get out of the system, resulting in the confidence you need to protect and preserve your financial assets through this transition. This is the danger zone. The cost of inaction or wrong action may be the regret of a lifetime.
What an exciting time to be alive. The dawning of the golden age is upon us. Goots, G-O-O-T-S, get out of the system now. Action on your behalf is required. Be on the right side of history. Please visit all 10 free modules at wealthcoachuniversity.com and schedule your private one-on-one Wealth Coach consult with me, John Michael Chambers. I look forward to meeting with you. It's time. I'll spend the next 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5, covering some important action items, because action changes things. Saving America and saving your hard-earned assets is not a spectator sport. It requires action. First, knowledge and information. We've provided that. And I'll give you some other resources for that. Visit wealthcoachuniversity.com. I personally produced and recorded 10 free video modules on just how to get out of the system and why, and what to get into. and the perils, dangers, and opportunities. WealthCoachUniversity.com. Visit the 10 free video modules. Second action item is Library of Truth. You'll find the Library of Truth at jmcbroadcasting.com. There are tabs: Save the Children, Robert David Steele interviews, G. Edward Griffin interviews, economy. You click on that, and there's a lot of, not my content, third-party documentaries and resources, Library of Truth, and there's a mini Library of Truth at wealthcoachuniversity.com as well. Also, Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark is one of my Patriot partners, triadretire.com. Brandon and I did an introduction on May 4th. You'll find it up on our platforms. But we're starting next week, for the next 6 or 8 weeks, doing a series specifically for retirees, strategies for retirees, how to have guaranteed income you could never outlive and have stock market index growth with zero downside risk. He is an expert in retirement planning, and stay tuned for that. We'll begin launching that in the next week or so for the next consecutive 6 or 8 weeks. Meanwhile, visit triadretire.com, say hello to Brandon Clark, and see how he may be able to help you. Item number 4, Bill Armour. Well, we know all about Bill. Acquiring gold and silver, very important. Give Bill a call. His team can help you with asset transfers and liquidations and all of that. He can provide the education and knowledge. It is a buyer beware market. Take my word for it, but actually don't. Go to the modules, watch the pitfalls of gold and silver, do your own homework, and then give Bill Armour a call, and he'll help machete you through that madness and bring you where you need to be during this incredible opportunity and time in history. Give Bill Armour a call. Last thing is me. I'm available on a very limited basis, and once this mess is over, I'm going to pull it as an availability. And I act as a wealth coach and a wealth consultant. Visit wealthcoachuniversity.com. You can click on a tab and join me privately on a Zoom. There's a way to secure that time with me where we go over personally your situation. I don't sell investments. I don't manage money. I don't sell metals. I don't do any of that. But I'm a recovering financial advisor from many years ago. And I know a thing or two of what goes on the other side of the aisle. I know a thing or two that's going on in today's world. And I can help you as a coach and consultant. Whether you secure an hour or 3 hours with me, that is up to you. We will spend the quality time together live on a Zoom, and I will help you make sense of this madness through analysis, commentary, coaching, and consulting, and then bring you to my resource network for a fast track to get you out of the system. So those are some action items. Let's look at image number 2, whatever that may be. There it is again, reminding you, 107, there's a great action item. Come join us in the premium portal May 28th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 107 for 1 solid hour to answer your question. Image 1, I believe, is Off-World. There it is, Off-World. Mentioned it 3 or 4 times because it's a new announcement. Very excited. One of my producers is helping us put together the first power panel for the premium episode. 4 guests and me to jump into Off-World with JMC. You don't want to miss this. Sign up for free, jmcbroadcasting.com. On the upper right, free subscription. Get our weekly alert. Get our weekly newsletter. Get my audio JMC Unplugged every Friday. Very candid on an audio, as well as other benefits, or consider the premium portal. But do sign up for free at jmcbroadcasting.com. That's a wrap. Been an extended show, but I work with frequency and energy, and I feel the vibe. I hope you do too. Great panel. Great information. Lots of questions you may have unanswered. Go do some homework. And I've given you some resources to help you with that. I want to just wish everyone an amazing week and weekend coming. Stay safe, everyone, and may God be with you.
The controlled demo
Bye.